Well, in particular, this is also part of a strategy to undermine the U.S. dollar. As long as the U.S. dollar is essentially the global currency, most deals are made in U.S. dollars. Even China's Belt and Road project, most of the deals involve U.S. dollars. This always puts the Chinese Communist Party at a disadvantage when trying to struggle against the United States. As long as the U.S. dollar has its kind of power, U.S. sanctions have a lot of power, whether it's the sanctions on Iran or all of the targeted sanctions on Chinese and Hong Kong officials that have happened under the Trump administration and the Biden administration. If the Chinese Communist Party is able to undermine the U.S. dollar and replace it with the yuan, for instance, or a digital currency that they're working on, then suddenly the United States loses its greatest power.
Right. I mean, it's really a matter of the entire global financial system using the U.S. dollars as the settlement currency between other countries, exchanges. But there's actually two factors that are weakening the U.S. dollar in this regard. Because one is China strengthening the renminbi and the digital currency, which is part of that, and the other is in response to the coronavirus, the U.S. started a sort of quantitative easing that weakens the value of the U.S. dollar. And we've also seen during the last couple months big spending bills that are paid for, with deficits. And this has happened over the last year. It's not just the current administration. But overall, what's happening is this weakens the U.S. dollar, right? And so other countries see this as like, oh, well, the U.S. dollar is getting weaker. Maybe if the U.S. keeps, quantitative easing, for simplicity, let's call it printing money to pay for spending, then, we can't trust the U.S. dollar as much, and maybe we should look to something else. But right now, the renminbi is not more reliable than the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar still has that dominant position. The danger is if the current sort of COVID era spending without actually, raising taxes to pay for it or whatever. If this current spending continues through quantitative easing, then the dollar will get weaker and weaker and weaker, and other countries will just gradually look more and more to other countries. And then this will be the Chinese Communist Party sees this as an opportunity to use the RMB as a dominant currency. And right now, for a long time, it's been pegged to the U.S. dollar, right? So it was 20 years ago, it was pegged at 8.26 and it was fixed. And then they unpegged it, but it kind of floats between 6 and 7 or something like that.
It's pegged to a basket of currency.
A basket of currencies, but it's the U.S. dollar. Like, let's be real. And also, they don't let it float, but they don't actually let it float too much, because if it gets beyond a certain amount in a trading day, they just stop the trading. And so it's still essentially pegged to the dollar, right? But China can just change that at any point. Once it feels it's like confident enough that it doesn't have to be, quasi pegged to the dollar, then they'll just kind of go, renminbi independence. And when they can't do it yet. But, if and when they do, then other countries will be like, oh, well, maybe this will be the benchmark currency, especially if there's more pressure to use a digital currency, which I don't think we should get into here. But if China can be a currency leader, then the U.S.'s sanctions don't work, because our sanctions work because, the banking system, Iran needs the global banking system to do trade, which they can't do if they're sanctioned. Hong Kong officials Carrie Lam gets her entire $600,000 annual salary in actual cash because she is locked out of the banking system, because, HSBC, which is a British bank, can't do business with her because HSBC relies on access to U.S. dollars, which can be, HSBC can be punished through these sanctions if they don't follow them. And so this is an enormous power. Controlling the money is an enormous power. And it really behooves us to appreciate this, to hold on to this, and never let it go if we want to maintain America's power to rein in authoritarian regimes.
I mean, that also has a lot to do. The value of the U.S. currency also has a lot to do with the fact that that's how we can sell treasuries. That's how, we can finance through debt all of the spending, right? But I think the Chinese Communist Party is still many years away from using the RMB as a reserve currency, like a world reserve currency, mostly because they cannot let go of the ability to control their monetary policy through controlling the currency. Like domestically, they need that kind of control so they can control inflation. Otherwise, they're going to have like a big problem with their domestic economy. So they always have that kind of like safety brake or whatever you want to call it, right? With their currency controls. So other countries aren't going to want to use the RMB as a reserve currency if the Chinese government can just change the value of that based on what's better for them domestically. So, I mean, but the one thing that the Chinese Communist Party is doing to try to accelerate this timeline of the world being dependent on the RMB is they're trying to force other countries, like if the companies that want to do business in China, they're trying to force them to use the RMB. Now, this hadn't really worked in the past because they hadn't really opened their financial markets. So they would be like, oh, well, in Hong Kong, we were opening trading between the dollar and the RMB, but most people were still just switching RMB for US dollars. So now they're trying this thing where if you want to come into the Chinese bond market, we have some bonds that you can buy in USD, but most of the bonds you're going to have to buy in RMB. And BlackRock, you're welcome to come, set up mutual funds in China, but it's all going to be in RMB now.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that BlackRock isn't telling investors. Well, they're telling it to them, right? But they're not like promoting that as the thing.
Because once they're in the RMB, they're locked in. They can't take that money out of China.
So you can convert your dollars to RMB, and you can invest those RMB in China. But if you ever want your money back, you can only convert them to RMB and not get them back in US dollars.
Yes, that's currently the kind of system that they're trying to set up.
So that sounds to me like digging a hole and putting your US dollars in the hole and then covering it back up.
Well, I think that like a lot of companies have this issue with like trying to move out of China. That it's hard for them to move their assets out of China, actually.
It's almost like the Chinese Communist Party set a trap for Western companies and they fell for it.
I think they're currently falling for it. Like they're currently like running towards the trap and falling inside it.
Ooh, shiny!
Yeah.
Well, so the solution is invest in Dogecoin.
Dogecoin?
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one my money is on.
Okay.
But
this is not financial advice.
Do not sue me. I have put all my money into Dogecoin. I don't have a lot of money anymore.
I just had this moment of panic being like, this is not financial advice. We need to say that now.
Yes. But you mentioned how Western companies just don't get it. It reminds me a little bit about what that Chinese professor who recorded himself and put it up on TikTok said about how China got so successful by simply copying and stealing the West's intellectual property. I think we have a clip of that. We'll put it up, and I will also do the voiceover as it goes because this is a podcast. After reform and opening up, we let the foreigners in. They brought in their technology, their cars, their money, their experience, their knowledge. China couldn't compete with the foreigners. So what did the Chinese government do? Let people start business partnerships with foreigners and use the partnerships to learn how to do it on our own. For the last 40 years, all we've done is plagiarize. We've copied our way to the top. We plagiarized wildly, copied wildly. What intellectual property rights? What patented technology? We'll get it first and deal with it later. And yet, despite how transparent that is, Elon Musk is still really trying to get in there.
I mean, to be fair, I don't think that Elon Musk is like watching Chinese professors on Douyin.
Well, he should be watching China Uncensored or Unscripted.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not like he's investing everything in China. He's just, going there to start building some stuff and setting up his, battery factory or whatever. Or It's just, it's just small things.
Yeah, it's not intellectual property that he's going to need or that other Chinese electric car makers are going to want.
Yeah, exactly.
Find that big pit, shovel the money in, bury it up. That's why Dogecoin is the perfect solution to the US dollar. Dogecoin can't get any lower.